Yes, the video has started. I just thought before we really got going that we'd take a moment here in the dark to think about all... Yeah, a jump scare. It's one of those things that works really well in movies and video, unless you're watching this on a phone, but I really hope you're in headphones, and doesn't work so well in Stephen King's home territory, the novel. That's why those of us who know him from this, and people who only know him from this, have very different impressions about the work of Stephen King. Now, I have read my fair share of Stephen King, and my collection has multiple copies of numerous titles so that I can lend them out, and anytime I see a library giving one away, I can't help but pick it up for $1. But I was immediately fascinated the first time I read one of his books, called The Dark Half, where he seemed to be warning us that all of us have a little bit of darkness inside of us, and we better keep a close eye on it if we don't want it to start walking around with a razor blade.
Why do you think your ability to terrify people makes them love you?
On the last tour, what I heard the most was, "You scare the hell out of me. Can I have a hug?" So, you know, I've become sort of America's teddy bear with little daggers or something.
But why all the scary stories, Steve?
I love the idea of frightening people, and I won't kid you about that. I just absolutely love it. I always like to, as we near the end of these things, I like to remind you that wherever all of you left your cars, you know, almost anybody could be in the back seat.
It's one of the questions he gets asked the most right after, where do you get your ideas?
And I've gotten to the point where I say there's a little shop somewhere in Connecticut, and they're a dime a piece, recycled most of them, but still usable.
And Hollywood seems to agree. But they also want to know why. Why horror? Why does he want to scare the living daylights out of people?
When I was a kid, there was a guy who, maybe the first of the modern serial killers. He was a guy named Charlie Starkweather.
Right.
And I had a scrapbook. I cut out all these clippings of him, and my mother found this scrapbook. It was 57, so I would have been about 10 years old. And I think she decided right then and there that not all my wheels were on the road anymore. And she said, why are you interested in this guy? What I was not able to tell her was, there was one picture of this young man who killed these people, and what there was in his eyes was nothing at all. And what I was not able to tell her was, I need to look out for this guy. I need to know everything about him so that if I ever meet him or anybody like him, I can go around.
And he's been introducing us to the bad guys ever since. He wants us to know that evil comes in all shapes and sizes, and it's doggone hard to get away from it. But it's even more elemental than that. Horror is just the hook to pull us in. It's one of the great strengths of Stephen King that his elevator pitch is killer. It hooks us, and we want to know what happens. They're all what ifs. But once he's got us, he wants to talk to us about something else as well. Like, what if most of the Earth's population was killed off by a virus, and the remaining factions were good and evil that had to face off against each other?
In The Stand, I got a chance to write about what happens when we finally realize that our technology has outraced our morality.
What if a telekinetic knew that a political figure was going to cause the end of the world?
The alienation of the prodigy, the person who knows something or can do something that's different from everyone else.
What if the devil opened a cozy resale shop that fulfilled everyone's secret dreams?
Greed in the 80s, and how funny greed really is when you get right down to it.
How bigotry and hatred feeds on itself and festers. The danger of people who think there are no longer consequences for their actions.
I even got to talk about how hard it is to get out of bed in the morning.
But even the deeper meaning underneath the horror isn't why he does it. That's not why.
They want to know what twisted me to do what I'm doing, and the truth is even more horrible. The answer is nothing. I'm just this way naturally.
He said it perfectly in an interview with Alexandra Alter in the New York Times book section. And I can't do impressions, so I'm not going to. And especially if I try to do an impression of him, it would probably be really insulting. So I'm just going to do what his words on a page always sound like to me. She asked him, what made you want to write scary stories in the first place? The classic question. And he said,
nothing. There are certain minerals, for lack of a better word, buried in our nature that come with the DNA that are part of the original equipment. For me, I was 8 or 9 years old and my brother and I were going through some stuff my mother had in a crawl space in an apartment in Stratford, Connecticut, and there were boxes and boxes of my father's stuff. There were a bunch of paperbacks, and one of them had a cover that showed this green monster crawling out of an open grave. My brother didn't want anything to do with that, and I looked at that and I thought, that's mine. I want to know what that's about. As a kid, I went to see every horror movie I could possibly see. Sometimes my brother went with me. My brother's 2 years older and he would put his hat over his face. I never put my hat over my face.
I'm in this theater in Maine with Stephen King, sitting next to Stephen King, watching a horror movie, which is like a dream in life, right? So you're watching, and every time someone was really horribly killed, he would go, "That's awesome!" He loved it. He was so...
That makes so much
He loved
sense.
it.
He goes by that old adage, write what you know. And he knows what scares him. And it scares us too. Not because of jump scares.
And there are a lot of folks that come up to me and say, I haven't read any of your books, but I've seen all of your movies. And if they say they've seen all of my movies, I think, oh, you poor sap.
It's because of his characters.
I don't think that you have to amp up the gore. You don't have to amp up the situations. What you always have to amp up is character, and give people that are reading your books characters that they care about, either for good or for bad. And if you do that, then the fright or the suspense, the terror, if you will, that follows naturally.
And a lot of the movies focus on monsters and plot and contrivances, and that's not the true strength of Stephen King novels.
I feel like you have to follow the characters and you have to follow the story where it leads. And the last thing that I want to do is to spoil a book with plot.
But he is a devotee of genre.
I was a fantasy writer from the very beginning, from the time when I first picked up a pen and discovered how fast the time passed when I was making things up in my mind.
But it's not to sell books, it's because it's what he's interested in.
As long as I stick to what I'm good at, what the voice tells me to write, it usually comes out, each one seems a little different. I've tried other things from time to time. I tried a Western one time because I really like Westerns, and the only scene of that one was any good was when the hero's father got drunk and fell into the pig pen and the pigs ate him.
And the man can't stop. He tries to write a minimum of 2,000 words a day, and he doesn't take weekends.
When I write the last book that I feel like I can publish, I'm sure that I'll still go up to the office and clatter away at whatever I'm doing. If it were a matter of money, I would never have to set my pen to paper or turn on my word processor again.
Yet he continues, and he says exactly why in the fantastic book On Writing.
When you find something at which you are talented, you do it, whatever it is, until your fingers bleed or your eyes are ready to fall out of your head. Even when no one is listening or reading or watching, every outing is a bravura performance because you, as the creator, are happy.
Or hey, maybe it's just the simplest thing of all.
I do like to scare people. That's a lot of fun.